Hello, this is Branko Malic of Kali Tribune. In this podcast, we'll treat a subject we already visited upon a few times and is, kind a sign of continuity of our work on Kali Tribune, so it's quite appropriate to focus on it back again now because we had a bit of a gap in publishing new materials that will change now. It's a problem of time, to be more precise, problem of the past and our relation to the past, the metaphysical, ontological, and whatever implications of it. We already touched upon it in some of our work, especially that was dealing with an so-called ontological mood of nostalgia. I'll put a link in the show notes to that article podcast that was dealing with phenomena of nostalgia in Southeastern Europe with special accent on ex-Yugoslavia because the space of ex-Yugoslavia, because that's where I'm from and I know it best. But already we mentioned some of the Russian, let's say, artists, avant-garde rock music artists, if rock can be called art, that lived and died at the turn of the last decades of 20th century, and how their intuition of the dissolution of societies they lived in, their private lives, because most of those people ended up dead for various reasons, was in fact a sort of quote-unquote incurable insight into nature of time, past time, and its endangerment by what we call, and I hate this word, but I have to use it, postmodernity. That is to say, in the age of dissolution. Here on Kali Tribune, we tend to use some buzzwords. We even constructed some technical terms like politics of dissolution, age of dissolution, or the age of dissolution is widely used in other corners too, to describe or to point out some phenomena, some things that are not, in my opinion, clearly recognized yet, especially by social sciences, and the state of social sciences is also, in my opinion, a rather, let's say, out of shape. Not very, not much flattering to say about it. But here we, as those who follow this site know, we tend to evade what I call the easy way. That is to say, of taking a position that is political, ideological position, sometimes masquerading as metaphysical, and then analyzing things through it. That would be taking libertarian or liberal position. Especially these libertarian, liberal positions are very simple. They are based on very simple principles or imitations of principles, through which you can very easily criticize other things, sometimes rather successfully. But there is always at least 1% a lie in all of this. Only in metaphysics there is 0% lies, and this is the principle we tend towards. Of course, it is unattainable by the very nature of human being, but it is also not a pure ideal. Approaching the principles in thinking, in doing, in being, after all, is a requirement, and as a requirement it is built upon in our nature, that we really progress towards principles, although never attaining it, and not only putting it as an ideal and then changing the world and our exterior selves are in accordance with it. So, from the metaphysical point of view, past, as I already wrote numerous times, is a dimension of being with a big B, and that is the dimension of being's necessity. Because when you come to root of it, analyze the way we talk about it. What I just said, the root of it. Where is the root? If we are inspecting something that indeed has roots, and everything has either figuratively or not, because roots are of course something plants have, but languages are built upon using these symbolic expressions for something that cannot be expressed in a sensual manner. For instance, this physis, Greek word for nature, is also comes from growth or vegetable florical kingdom. In Croatian, bitak comes from biće, that also has a very strong connection and congeniality with the word biljka, which means plant. So not to go too far into this, but these are probably not accidental things. And this is why when we talk about roots, when we talk about causes, when we talk about origins, we have an image of going deep, of going high, sometimes both at the same times, and most importantly, of going back. And this is why the temporal dimension of being that is considered the root of time is past, because time flows from the past towards the future, how we imagine it. Now imagine what would happen if the past was brought to nothing. Everything would be brought to nothing, because the stable foundation of everything would be gone. Now, it's very hard to think in these terms, and it's good that it's very hard to think in these terms, because we have to, by our nature and by the nature of the world that precedes our nature, we cannot think in this way. We cannot imagine such situation. Yet this situation is afoot. The tendency to erase the past. Erasure of time is the erasure of past. I can't remember how many times I heard that you have to live in the moment. Whether it be commercials selling you products such as deodorants or condoms or whatever, and at the same time people writing books in psychology and psychoanalysis, even Erich Fromm comes to mind, who are doing the same thing, not selling straightforwardly, but saying the same thing: you have to live in a moment. The only real thing is now. Yet people, for some reason, had a problem of making the correlation between the two, because one was this entertainment industry or advertising industry, the other was deep psychology, counterculture, nonetheless, and such. Yet, from the vantage point of our time, our day and age, that is to say, post-90s, I would say, because post-1991, there is I'm certain that there is a very precise moment in time where you can pinpoint when this rift occurred, when things started to come to light. We can see this. We can see this very clearly. Not that some people couldn't see it before, but those were far and few in between. Now everybody can see it, only if he wants to see it. Why this insistence on now? Why constantly trying in philosophy to push mysticism. Mysticism over dogma, over rites, over rites in the sense of ritual, of liturgies, over sacraments in religion, over formalities, and so on. Always this, and then it is said that mysticism is this ability, is connected to this ability to live in now, to be in God's now, and so on and so forth. However, this is extremely misleading. The ability to live in the now of being is an ability to live in a fullness of time, to an extent that it is possible to man. Having a body in the state, from the point of view of Christian, in the state of fallenness, this is not entirely possible, because it cannot be absorbed in the fullness of being, in the fullness of God. And there is a promise that it will be. But we won't go into preaching now. Preaching mode, we always avoid this on Kali Tribune for various reasons. The thing is that mysticism, as I already said a few times, is not what is sold for mysticism in 20th, late 20th and early 31st century. It's not. Mysticism is connected to dogma. It is the great mystics were also the very strict observers of rules of religious life, not only of their monastic orders, but also of dogmatic teachings of the church and so on. This was something completely different than what we would understand now, because mysticism is understood as some kind of individualistic liberation. Now, I talked a lot about this in a series of Nicolas of Cusa's De Visione Dei. I'm here just trying to use it to illustrate how wrongfully the things are presented for mass consumption, because this is I still remember the time where there was an intellectual mass consumption. Now you don't even have that, because nobody is very intellectual anymore. No great loss. Anyways, the past is the dimension of time that is under attack, and it is negated. So it's not now, the present is not the future, hardly the future, because idea is the idea of progress. Still, this modern idea of progress, but now completely unfettered by anything. And it is not rightful to say that I don't know if that nobody that the modern world doesn't let us live in the now or live in the future. It doesn't let us live in the past. That's what is forbidden. And this is something to be pointed out relentlessly. What is very interesting is that this is apparently seems counterintuitive, because living in the past, the very structure of sentence I used purposefully, automatically brings forth an intuition of loss, or intuition of drawing into oneself, of running from the world in escapism and so on and so forth. I don't know, is it accidental that, I don't think it's really accidental, that this is how the past is portrayed now. But what is interesting is precisely living in the past in the right sense is a required thing to do, to be made whole again. Because the only possible way to have one's attachment to time, let's say union or even consubstantialization with time, because time is inseparably intimate for every human being. Not that it is his or hers time. in a sense that it is produced by consciousness, as well as is the idea in good deal of modern philosophy. No, but as a shared participation is the most important thing, because time is a life of soul. Soul is living of the soul is time, what we call time. And when you have this kind of injury on the wholeness of this life, which has to have three directions or three dimensions, when you take one out, you take all three out together with it, and for them you get counterfeits. You have this infinite now, where every moment is kind of like new beginning. And I think that we can see this indirectly in our external lives, because this is not something you can observe inwardly, because it is external process. Time is internal, but this counterfeiting of time is externalization of time. For instance, I'll give you one very concrete example. Jobs, previously known also as vocations, became such that everybody is required to change them constantly. I belong to the generation that still remembers this as an absurdity. You couldn't believe that, especially if you were on university, that you could master 5, 6 to 10 jobs, 10 different professions in one life. When you choose your faculty, most people, most people, for instance, in my country, everywhere with 18, 19 years old, don't know what they want, or better to say, don't know what they are made of, don't know what they are cut out for. But some of us are lucky enough to pinpoint the right university, and once you realize you get it, you got it, the idea was, this will be your life. You find your vocation, you find your profession. Now you have to learn, and this learning, a kind of apprenticeship, would be something that lasts until you're 25, 26. Then you would go further and further and further until you die, go into retirement. This was kind of like a principal understanding of work. Not everybody had that, not even majority had something like that, but some people had. Some people had. And I do remember that even in communist, socialist crap state, this was possible. Now, not only it's not possible, it's not imaginable anymore. It's not conceivable anymore. Because the idea is that everybody can do or should do everything. That there is nothing given. That there is no purpose that is given to you, and that you only can discover, God willing. No. You make up the purpose as if it was possible, but it is not possible. You are sold upon idea that it is possible. So you have to change jobs constantly. You have to change your personality, because your profession can be the thing that qualifies you in the deepest sense of the word, giving you your quality of what you are, your quidditas, your act of being, so to speak, is what you do. This is all gone through the window. It's not impossible, because you can continue in your free time, your spare time, when you draw from the world, draw back from the world that is grinding you. You concentrate, focus, and gather yourself back into your inner sanctum. But this means living underground, living under floorboards. And a lot of us do that, even if outwardly we have extremely active and productive lives. this is no life. What I find astonishing is this that this happened, and that we never noticed it happen. Even I, who am talking or writing about it so much, haven't noticed it when it happened. I noticed it when it occurred. It was a process. I started noticing it only afterwards, and then formulating it for what it is. Now, why this happens? Well, why is always the most difficult question. I think it will be somewhat obvious from what happens. Now, this is destruction of time, destruction of soul, and consequently dissolution of man. Because to take a example once more, example of changing jobs. Now, if you want to change jobs constantly, you will sooner or later come at an impasse, because this is impossible. One man is cut out for one profession, maybe two, and that's it. Not 30, not 10. The only thing that can do this variety of job is a machine, digital machine, computer, and this is the direction of where this goes, and this all comes from this cutting, separating dimensions of time from the past, from its fundamental, original, from its origin. It can seem far-fetched to you, but I assure you it is not. Just look at the everyday examples I just mentioned, and I think this is in the job, the work example is uncontestable. After all, are we not all bearing scars from it? You can't contest scars. You can't deny when something is killing you. You can't deny its existence. And this is this nihilism of work, of contemporary work, is murderous, and it's hardly something you can deny. You can't live in denial of it. Especially if you remember different times, and moreover the times of modernity, because for instance, I don't remember pre-modernity. How could I? You have traces of it because modernity kept them, especially, well, in these communist-held countries where past was frozen in time, where you could encounter pre-modern mentality even on daily basis if you lived in province, in smaller town, rural areas, and even now you can still run into it. Not all is lost, because everything goes slow here, if it goes anywhere. But this is something that really happened, and the fundament of it is this metaphysical dimension, the dimension of being, the past of being, so to speak, if I'm permitted, the past of God. Okay, but there is no past in God, but there is eternity, and then past is a dimension, not a successive moment that was and is not no more, but this is eternally present, but is differentiatedly eternally present. The God is not to be understood. I mean, this eternity of eternal things should not be understood from time, from what is external, observable, but what is internal and what is congenial to them. So it's better to try to understand time from eternity than eternity from time. But that's something we will speak about in the future. I'm constantly opening very difficult subjects that could go in all kinds of directions. So this was the example everyday example, somewhat scary and depressive example or expression of metaphysical malady. I think that it is very obvious, something that is very easy to show, and something that bothers a lot of people, but they don't always find words to express what bothers them. Well, that's why we on Kali Tribune are here. So, and just to announce in conclusion that we are preparing a new kind of podcast that me and Mihai will do podcasts. Of course, we have a Luminar podcast with Didre, but we have nothing planned out yet for three of us. And now this will be something done by Mihai and me. Hopefully this weekend or another weekend, subjects on various subjects, one of them being, this will be one of them, of course, but we'll talk about Renegade and traditionalism, also a bit of concrete things thrown in the mix, concrete authors, and we'll circle around our usual subjects from Kali Tribune. Thank you for your attention. This was Branko Malic, Kali Tribune, signing out.